Very good evening to all our viewers and welcome to tonight's edition of Primetime News, coming to you live from our Newsfirst studios in Colombo. I'm Arundhati Mudannayaka, together with our interpreter this evening, Tharaka Gabriel. We'll start off with a look at the stories making headlines this evening.
Inoculation of COVID-19 vaccine begins. More than 5,000 vaccinated. Port Trade Union stage Work to Rule campaign. Minister Namal's stance on listing shares of the East Container Terminal in the Colombo Stock Exchange. Defence Secretary says a new program will be introduced to prevent seized drugs from re-entering the drug trade.
අපි දෙවන තීරණය විදියට දැන් කටයුතු කරගෙන යනවා. කුඩු තොගයක් අහුවෙච්ච වහම ඒ තොගය විනිශ්චයකාරතුමෙක් ඉදිරියට පත් කළා. එතුමාගේ නිර්දේශය අනුව පොඩි සාම්පලයක් තියාගෙන ඉතුරු සම්පූර්ණ ප්‍රමාණයම කිරලා සම්පූර්ණයෙන්ම විනාශ කළා දාන්න.
And now the stories in detail. Sri Lanka began administering the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine manufactured in India under the brand name Covishield today. State Minister Sudarshini Fernando-Pulle said that 5,132 individuals had received the jab across 9 hospitals today. She also added that the recipients have not yet developed side effects so far.
Sri Lanka kicked off its COVID-19 vaccination drive at the National Institute of Infectious Diseases with the participation of India's High Commissioner to Sri Lanka, Gopal Bagle, Presidential Advisor Lalit Weeratunga and State Minister Dr. Sudarshini Fernando-Pulle. The Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine, manufactured in India under the brand name Covishield, was first administered on Dr. Anand Vijay Vikrama, who is attached to the Infectious Diseases Hospital.
Any medicine has its side effects. Based on the information we have received from the UK, the elderly population has a lesser tendency to display side effects concerning the vaccine.
The vaccine was later administered among the healthcare workers at the National Institute of Infectious Diseases.
Although we have received a batch of vaccines as a donation, the President held discussions with the High Commissioner to procure the vaccines. We have requested India to give prominence to our country and to ensure that the vaccines reach our people at the earliest. We believe that vaccinating the population will help us to restore normalcy in the country.
I want to assure you, the entire public, it has been worked out on certain criteria. No favoritism. It's for those who qualify to get this vaccine that the vaccine will be given, and that we will strictly adhere to. And I must say that our task is not over. We are yet to do many things. We only hope by the end of the year we should be able to vaccinate at least 65% of the population which we have targeted. And I think everybody's effort as a team would be so crucial.
Assigning this responsibility to a separate minister indicated the seriousness with which the government of Sri Lanka had taken steps to counter this disease and was looking for options like a vaccine. In the matters of such diseases, international cooperation is an imperative. And no country, no matter how strong its resources, how capable its scientific and medical force, no country could fight this disease on its own. And when we speak of international cooperation, the policy of India has been defined by 2 phrases. We are one family, and in one family we all look after each other. The second principle is neighborhood first. When we look after each other in the entire world, of course, our friends next door, our neighbors are our first priority. And even within neighbors, I am very happy to say that Sri Lanka occupies a very, very special place in the hearts of India, in the hearts of Indians.
The process of administering the vaccines at the Army Hospital in Narayanpeta began under the auspices of Army Commander General Shavindra Silva. The commander of the 141st Brigade, Brigadier Lal Vijay Thunga, Colonel Dr. Shavin Semage and Captain Dr. Pasindu Pereira were among the first military officials to receive the jab.
Frontline workers in the health sector, The Triforces and the police are among the groups that will receive the jab under the first phase of our vaccination drive. We will administer the vaccine at selected hospitals of the Sri Lanka Army.
ශ්‍රී ලංකා යුද්ධ මුදාවෙන් රෝහල් තෝරාගත් රෝහල් වල අපි එන්නත් කරනු ලබනවා.
Meanwhile, healthcare personnel attached to the Air Force began administering the vaccines today. Air Vice Marshal Lalit Jayavira, who serves as the Director of Health Services in the Air Force, was among the first personnel to receive the vaccine. The Navy also began administering the vaccines among its personnel involved in the front lines of combating COVID-19. Vaccination programs are taking place at the Colombo National Hospital, the Homagama Base Hospital and the Kalubovila Teaching Hospital. Authorities said that the vaccines have been transported to areas outside the Colombo district and would be first administered among frontline workers.
What is the efficacy of the vaccine? The editor of the Government Medical Officers Association, Dr. Haritha Alutke, expressed these views during the Jatika Mehevara program aired on TV1 today.
We do not entirely know about this vaccine. Research on this vaccine is still underway in certain countries. A vaccine will not protect an individual from the virus. One should receive the second dose of the virus between 4 and 12 weeks after receiving the first dose. However, the second dose should be given after 4 weeks of receiving the first dose. Vaccine will only be effective against the virus 3 or 4 weeks after receiving the second dose. This vaccine is only 80% effective. In other words, 20% can contract the virus even after receiving both doses. For how long will this vaccine be effective? Will this vaccine prevent one from spreading the virus to another? This vaccine is still under the trial phase. Meanwhile, Minister of Education GL Piri said that a proposal will be put forward shortly to administer the vaccine among teachers. Teachers associate with the children closely on a daily basis. As we received the first batch of vaccines yesterday, I request Lalit Viratunga to include teachers among the priority groups that can receive the jab. As the Minister of Education, I feel this is a fair and appropriate request.
Sri Lanka's total number of COVID-19 cases rose to 61,980 after 394 new COVID-19 cases were detected today. Authorities said that 6,285 patients are currently under medical care. Health Ministry figures indicate that the total recoveries from the infection had risen to 55,398 after 963 individuals had recovered today. The total deaths caused due to COVID-19 in the country stands at 297. Deputy Director General of Public Health Services Dr. Hemantha Hera noted that 26 infected individuals are receiving treatment at intensive care units. The Ceylon College of Physicians and the Sri Lanka College of Internal Medicine organized a webinar today. The webinar revolved around the truths and myths surrounding COVID-19 vaccines.
The sorts of symptoms that we saw were the kinds of things that you expect after any vaccination. So, sore arm, feeling a bit tired and a bit fluey. But actually all these symptoms lasted only for a couple of days after vaccination and then resolved. The majority of the symptoms were mild, and what was interesting is that actually older people had far fewer symptoms than younger people. So based on all this advice, the safety and the efficacy data, the MHRA, the UK drug regulator, approved the use of the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine on the 30th of December last year, and many countries have since followed suit, including Sri Lanka last week.
Now there's increasing evidence that previous infection with COVID protects from reinfection. On the basis of the current clinical trial data, we cannot just assume that just because a vaccine has a 70% protection from symptomatic disease, it means that there's a 70% protection from transmission. The very high vaccine coverage in places like Israel. So we will, in the next few weeks and months, be able to see whether that high vaccine coverage is resulting in also reduction of transmission to other people who are not yet vaccinated. And also, I don't think it automatically means that just because you're vaccinated, you will be allowed to travel internationally without quarantine or whatever it is. So for the moment, we have to be cautious in that regard. The question of whether we would need yearly vaccination like we do with influenza, I don't think it will be as bad as influenza.
Port trade unions launched a Work to Rule campaign today, urging the protection of the Colombo Port's East Container Terminal.
Trade unionists staged a demonstration opposite the Sri Lanka Ports Authority, objecting to moves to give away a 49% stake of the Colombo Port's East Container Terminal to India's Adani Group. Civic activists representing the National Movement for the Protection of the East Container Terminal were among those who joined the demonstration. President Gotabaya Rajapaksa must hear our voice, as he is a leader who is concerned about countries. We are requesting measures to retain the ownership of the East Container Terminal. The President can do it. He has the power to do that. He has a two-thirds majority along with the executive powers. We request him to use those powers to retain the East Container Terminal under our control. All employees at the Sri Lanka Ports Union have launched a work to rule trade union action. If our voices are ignored, we will halt operations at the port. We wish to remind the government that we will do it. We will not stop our struggle. We would like to question the government on why they are attempting to sell off the port out of fear for India, while there is a massive public outcry against such moves. We would like to inform President Gotabaya Rajapaksa that this is the right time to reverse this decision. Don't sell the port. That is our message. Meanwhile, State Minister Nalaka Godaheva and the former chairman of the Sri Lanka Ports Authority, Dr. Priyat Bandhu Vikrama, arrived at the scene of the protest, representing the Viatmaga movement. Our policy titled Vistas of Prosperity and Splendor clearly indicates our approach regarding the terminal. According to this policy, the East Container Terminal must be developed by the government through the Sri Lanka Ports Authority. The Viatmaga movement is of this stance, but what we need to understand is that the problem was not created by us, but by the previous government.
නැගෙනහිර පර්යන්තයට ඉන්දියාව සම්බන්ධ කරගෙන මේ ආපු අර්බුදය මේ අර්බුදය දැන් අපි විසඳ ගන්නට ඕනේ. ඔයගොල්ලන්ගේ නිවැරදි යෝජනාව අපිට දෙන්න.
Give us your suggestions. We came here to inform you that we will work towards saving the East Container Terminal by standing on behalf of your suggestions.
අපි ඔබ වැඩ කරන පරන්තයක් හිමි වන තුරු මොන මහත්ය ආවත් දෙන්නේ මෙතන මහජන නියෝජිතයක් සහ සංවිධානයක් අපි පිළිගත්ත සංවිධානයක් රට පිළිගත්ත සංවිධානයක් නියෝජන පිරිසක් විතරයි ආවේ පුද්ගලයෝවත් කවුරුවත් අදාළ කරගන්න එපා.
Although the National Movement for the Protection of the East Container Terminal invited the members of the Viatmaga movement, the members of the Viatmaga movement left the premises. These were the views expressed regarding the East Container Terminal during an event organized by the Viatmaga movement before the government came into power. Only $70 million was spent for the construction of this terminal. Another $60 million was allocated for this project. We could have set up cranes at the premises and launched operations. We could have used $100 million to develop the rest of the port. Instead of developing the terminal further, the government is trying to sell it off, just as they did to the Hambantota port. The government claims that we cannot handle operations at the port. In 2013, I attended a conference in India. During the event, I was questioned as to why Indian companies are not allowed to participate in bids advertised by the Sri Lankan government. I questioned them as to how we could give away our ports to India when Indian ports are operated by Dubai. But today the situation is such that we are selling off all our resources despite having skilled officials who are capable of managing them.
මිනිස්සු ඉන්න රටක අපි අපේ ටික පිටට විකුණලා දැන් මූද දිහා බලාගෙන ඉන්නව නැව් වෙනකම්.
මේ අකුරට වැඩ කිරීම එහෙම නැත්නම් වැඩ වර්ජනය කිරීමෙන් වෙන්නේ.
Engaging in a work to rule campaign or launching a strike will obstruct avenues that can strengthen our economy and also stop the inflow of foreign currency. These issues must be resolved through discussions. A cabinet paper has been tabled on this matter. Under this proposal, we have appointed a committee to discuss these matters. That committee is engaging in discussions. A final decision is yet to be reached. Given that trade union action is being initiated, although a final decision has not been reached, we are suspicious whether there is a force involved in dragging our economy backwards and stalling the progress of the Sri Lanka Ports Authority.
වෙනස් කරන්නත් වෙනත් බලපෑම් තියෙනවද කියන ප්‍රශ්නාර්ථයක් තියෙනවා.
We have to pay heed to the advice of the Mahasangha and even listen to the trade unions. Those who held parties when national resources were sold are the ones who shout now. So as a government, we will always safeguard national assets. How can the shares of the port be listed in the Colombo Stock Exchange? I will be able to answer the question once the cabinet has been made aware of this.
ඊයේත් මාධ්‍යවල පෙන්නවා අදානි සමාගමට විරෝධතාවල් තියෙනවා සෑහෙන රටවල් ගණනාවකම ඒගොල්ලෝ කළා තියෙන දේවල් පෙන්නවා. ඒ ගැන පොඩි අදහසක් දෙන්න. අදානි සමාගම ගැන මම දන්නේ නැහැ. ඒක ඉන්දියා සමාගමක්. දැන් මේක දෙන්න අදානි සමාගමක් නෙමෙයි දැන් මෙතන. ඒ පිළිබඳව දෙන්නේ කාටද කොහොමද දෙන්නේ කියන කැබිනට් මණ්ඩලය දැනුවත් කරන්න ඕනේ. ඒ වගේම කොහොමද මේ සමාගම තෝරගත්තේ කියන එක පිළිබඳවත් අපිව දැනුවත් කරන්න ඕනේ. ඊට පස්සේ අපිට පුළුවන් උත්තරයක් දෙන්න.
The President instructed the Cabinet and Minister Rohit Abegunawardena to give a brief on the plan. They went through all the factors for hours, but once the presentation was over, the Cabinet did not have a reason to oppose this, so the Cabinet granted its approval. This will not be a sale or given on lease. This campaign is being staged to create conflicts with India. The President and the Cabinet has given us the freedom to express our honest views. A final decision has not yet been reached. The President will make a decision after considering the advice given by the Mahasangha.
ගනි මහාසංඝයා වහන්සේලාගේ අනුශාසනා ලැබගෙන.
කැබිනට් පත්‍රිකාව දැම්මේ. දැන් යම් පටන් ගන්න එන්න එපා. රෝහිත අබේගුණවර්ධන ඇමතිතුමා මගින් මං කියන්නේ එතුම දැම්ම කියලා. මොකද්ද දැම්මේ? 149ක් ඉන්දියාවේ අදානිට කියලා ලියලා තියෙනවා.
The cabinet paper says that 49% is for the Adani group, which means this fight started from there.
උඹලා ගන්නවා එහෙනම්. බිලාන් පෙරේරා මීට් ගන්නවා වගේ එකක් ඇහෙනවා. ගාමින් ලොකුගේ යම් පටන් ගන්නවා එහෙනම්. එක එක්කෙනාගේ එක එක සද්ද ඇහෙනවා. රටේ නැති ಜಾති බයිලා ගහනවා. ඔය බයිලා ගහනේ කොහොම විසඳනවා මේ සඳුදා. We
hear different opinions from the people. It is like a zoo. All these will come to an end on Monday. There will be a cabinet paper by next week since this was opposed, and a new one will be submitted. Since there was opposition, they will submit a new cabinet paper claiming that this was what was proposed by the cabinet subcommittee. If the people of this country have dignity, once the announcement is made on Monday, stand against this. They don't know anything. Someone else is going to do their job.
සඳුදා එනවා ගාමින් ලෝකෙට හම්බෙලා නැත්තම් අනිත් ලෝකෙලට හම්බෙලා නැත්තම් සඳුදාගෙන් වාඩි වෙනකොට බඩු දියේ. එදාට බලමුකෝ මොකක්ද ඒගොල්ලෝ ගන්න තීරණය කියලා.
අපිට ඇහෙනවා සමහර රාජ්‍ය ඇමතිවරු.
We saw how certain state ministers adamantly said that this would be given no matter what the others say. So we asked them to hand over their personal inheritance and not this. This is owned by the people of this country. They can't give away what the people own because they have only been given 5 years to remain in power. We are not talking about an asset we won. We are representing the government that has been elected. The people voted us for only 5 years, but the national resources belong to us, our children and their unborn children. So we can't allow this to affect the trust that has been placed in us.
අපේ දරුවන්ට පමණක් නෙමෙයි නූපන් ලාංකිකයන්ටත් අයිතිය කියන කාරණේ අපි තේරුම් ගන්න ඕනේ. ඒ නිසා ඒ ජනතා විශ්වාසය කිසිදු ආකාරයකින් පළුදු කිරීමට අපට කිසිදු හැකියාවක් නැtei කියන එක මම තරයේ විශ්වාස කරනවා.
පහුගිය යහපාලන ආණ්ඩුවේදී මේ වරාය බේර ගන්න පුළුවන් උනේ මෛත්‍රීපාල සිරිසේන ජනාධිපතිවරයා.
During the previous government, the port was saved because of Maithripala Sirisena. They have now replaced the word selling with the word investing. The Sri Lanka Freedom Party will support the struggle launched by trade unions of the Sri Lanka Ports Authority.
තිකත්වය පිරිහුණු සංස්කෘතියක් තුළ එය පෝෂණය කිරීමට. එම තත්ත්වය වෙනස් වෙනකොට යම් ආකාරයක කලකිරීමක් සහ දුකක් වේදනාවක් අපට තියෙනවා.
දැන් මේ පාස්කු බෝම්බ ප්‍රහාරයට සම්බන්ධ අපි දන්නවා පෞගේ කාලේ පුරාම අපි කතා කරා.
Now we know about the April 21st attacks. Why aren't they asking for Sara? Sara was the wife of the man known as Hamdun, who was killed in the Katuapiti attack. The OIC of the Kalamanchikudi traffic police, who assisted in sending her to India, is now in custody. Why not ask for her now? Sara Jasmine knows about the main suspect, who knows all of these things, knows all the details, planned them and was behind this attack. Sara Jasmine, or Pulastini Mahendran, says she is the only surviving suspect who knows who exactly did this. Are they threatening to reveal what they know while keeping Sara in India if the East Container Terminal is not given to them? There might be a deal that is currently being struck.
The National Freedom Front today announced that Minister Vimal Weerawansa has invited 5 political parties to arrive at a strong decision if a cabinet paper is put forward on Monday regarding the Colombo Port's East Container Terminal. According to the statement, Weerawansa had extended the invitation to the leaders of 5 constituent parties of the Sri Lanka Nidahas Podujana Sandhanaya during a telephone call. A discussion on the matter is expected to take place at Minister Vimal Weerawansa's official residence in Colombo tomorrow. Leader of the Pivithuru Hela Urumaya Udaya Gamanpila, General Secretary of the Lanka Samasamaj Party Professor Tissa Vitarna, General Secretary of the Communist Party of Sri Lanka Dr. G. Veerasinghe, Leader of the Sri Lanka Mahajana Party Asanka Navaratna and Leader of the Eksat Mahajana Party Tiran Alas are among the invitees for the meeting. The problem now is that this was turned into an issue against India. What is the government conspiring? The Prime Minister has called for a meeting among government members to decide on the fate of the East Container Terminal. The cabinet that would convene on Monday is expected to arrive at a decision on the East Container Terminal. Currently, there are 2 proposals under consideration. The first is to allow the Sri Lanka Ports Authority to retain 100% ownership of it. The idea behind this is that the terminal would not be given away, but the construction of the West Container Terminal has not been completed. The West Container Terminal will then be handed over to India after being constructed. According to the second proposal, the shares of the East Container Terminal will be sold in the share market. The Adani company has a 49% stake, while 51% of the ownership lies with the government. They will release these shares to be sold. Afterwards, the Sri Lanka Ports Authority will purchase 15% of the shares. The rest will be sold to the private sector. It is not just the Adani company that would be involved in this. This is likely to resolve the quarrels of those who were opposing India. Meanwhile, the opposition has questioned as to whether the struggles surrounding the East Container Terminal would be swept under the carpet in future, in a manner similar to the concerns on the dual citizenship clauses under the 20th Amendment. 2 contradicting opinions have arisen within the government, but we have a suspicion as to whether this is an attempt to give away the East Container Terminal to India by deceiving the people while pretending to take the stance of the opposition, just as they did on the 20th Amendment.
Sri Lanka, 65,610 square kilometers. Sri Lanka's exclusive economic zone, over 512,000 square kilometers. Call it what it is. The Sea of Sri Lanka.
West Australia Supporting Farmers and the Sikh Council of Western Australia organised a protest in front of the Consulate General of India in solidarity with the Republic Day Farmers' protest and tractor parades across India on the 26th of January. Approximately 500 people joined the No Farmers, No Food event, where they heard from community leaders while organisers distributed cool drinks, water and samosas. One of the organisers told Foreign Media, quote, "Great turnout, one of the biggest we had," end quote. He further said another rally on the 11th of December had drawn about 200 people. Adding further, he said the farmers who are doing all the hard work are going to be hit the hardest.
Now, as farmers in India are demanding for justice, several farmers in Sri Lanka are also facing hardships, especially due to the damages faced by their crops.
Farmers across the country are facing massive losses due to crop damages amidst economic hardships due to COVID-19. Cornfields in Pallebedda and Uhunudanawa, spanning across 1,500 acres, have been infested with Sena caterpillars. As a result, farmers are facing difficulties in affording meals while their hopes have been dashed after months of hard work. More than 800 families have been left helpless due to this situation. Meanwhile, the farmers in Gaul are suffering due to the lack of water to irrigate their cultivations. Farmers in the Alpitiya-Ekolaha area point out that they have managed to cultivate 200 acres amid severe hardships. The only anicut used to supply water to their fields is in a dilapidated condition. An unidentified disease spreading across fields in Bandagiriya has worsened the woes of farmers. Around 1,500 acres of paddy fields have been destroyed due to this disease that is damaging crops. Farmers of Putlam are also striving hard to protect their fields from marauding wild elephants. More than 300 acres of cornfields have been destroyed by herds of wild elephants that encroach into the village. Farmers say that they will be left with no alternative but to take to the streets if their pleas go unheard.
Also in local news, Sri Lanka's national resources have caught the eye of foreign entities that aim at exploiting them at a minimum cost. Against such a backdrop, Australia's Titanium Sands Limited has gained control of a project targeting the mining of minerals on Mannar Islands.
Newsfirst exposed a scheme that has allowed Australian company Titanium Sands Limited to get hold of a mineral project taking place on Mannar Islands. This Newsfirst investigation uncovers several other concerns on this project.
In 2016, Windimura Vanadium Private Limited was transformed to Titanium Sands Limited, ostensibly to reflect the company's focus on mineral exploration and development. Since then, Titanium Sands Limited has been solely focused on the exploration and the possibility of mining Sri Lanka's minerals. Titanium Sands Limited gained hold of Mannar Islands mineral project after travelling more than 4,500 miles to acquire two Mauritian shell companies that in turn own the exploration license holders. When Titanium Sands Limited purchased two Mauritian companies named Srinel Holdings Limited and Bright Angel Limited, the tax treaty signed between Mauritius and Sri Lanka in 1996 seemed to favour the Australian establishment. This is because the treaty grants tax concessions on dividends paid to the Mauritian shell firms. But the tax on dividends were removed by the government from the 1st of April last year, making the project even more lucrative for Titanium Sands Limited. The exemption of taxes will result in potential revenue losses for Sri Lanka, given the value of its mineral resources. In June 2020, Titanium Sands Limited announced that it had discovered nearly 265 metric tons of valuable minerals such as ilmenite, rutile and zircon on Mannar Island. Although the Australian company has claimed that it has no plans to mine Sri Lanka's minerals until receiving the necessary approval, other documents filed by the company prove otherwise.
Titanium Sands Limited has already admitted commencing talks with parties in China, Japan, India and the United Arab Emirates targeting the export of Sri Lanka's minerals. These discussions are taking place even before obtaining a mining license from Sri Lanka's Geological Survey and Mines Bureau. The address of Bright Angel Limited, another Mauritian shell company purchased by Titanium Sands, has been indicated as Level 10, Nextera Com Tower 1, Cyber City, Ibin.
Srinel Holdings Limited was a Mauritian shell company purchased by Titanium Sands Limited to gain ownership of the exploration licenses. Mauritius records indicate the address of Srinel Holdings Limited as Vuna House, 53 Duper Street, Catbo. Incidentally, these addresses belong to a company identified as Vuna Capital Trustees. Newsfirst will continue to keep a close watch on this matter.
A luxury vehicle heading from Battaramulla to Boralla had toppled into the Devana lake after veering off the road due to speeding last evening.
The vehicle that passed Rajagiri had toppled into the Devana lake around 10 p.m. yesterday while running over a mother and a daughter in the area. A 20-year-old youth had been travelling in the vehicle that had been driven by a 21-year-old at the time of the accident. A tense situation arose after the two youths had fallen into the Devana lake and had rescued themselves following the mishap.
Please don't. ඔයාට වීඩියෝ එක අමාරු නම් හරිද? අපිට මිනිස්සු. දැන් බබා.
A 35-year-old mother and her 12-year-old daughter, who had been identified as residents of Rajagiri, had been injured in the incident. They are currently receiving treatment at the Kalubovila Teaching Hospital. A limb of the daughter had been severely injured due to the collision. The vehicle that toppled into the Devana lake was retrieved at midnight. The police has taken measures to arrest the driver and the passenger and to produce them in court.
The spokesperson for the US Department of State has tweeted on the report published by the UN Human Rights Chief on human rights violations in Sri Lanka.
In his tweet, Ned Price, the spokesman for the US Department of State, said that the US is carefully reviewing the significant report on human rights in Sri Lanka. He added that Sri Lanka's future depends on respecting human rights and taking meaningful steps to deal with the past. UN High Commissioner for Human Rights Michelle Bachelet had released her annual report recently ahead of the UN Human Rights Council's 46th session set to begin in Geneva on the 22nd of February. The tweet comes against a backdrop where the United States withdrew from the UNHRC in 2018 during the Trump administration. The US is expected to rejoin the body under US President Joe Biden.
The Pathfinder Foundation has said that Sri Lanka is left with only two options at the upcoming UN Human Rights Council sessions in February. The foundation made these remarks in reference to the latest report of the UN Human Rights Chief on human rights in Sri Lanka.
The foundation says the country can acknowledge the need to continue to address and resolve issues of accountability and reconciliation in Sri Lanka by preserving and building upon the progress made so far, and in that regard offer and receive international cooperation where necessary, including with the UN for technical assistance and advisory services. Or if, however, the sponsors continue to insist on undeliverable and unconstitutional solutions, Sri Lanka to completely withdraw from the HRC process and work towards a domestic consensus on the matter.
Defence Secretary retired Major General Kamal Gunaratne says that a new program is being implemented to prevent seized drugs from being re-entering the drug trade. The Defence Secretary made these remarks at an event in Nitambur today.
A drug prevention and rehabilitation center was declared open today in the Mahenawata area in Nitambur under the auspices of the Defence Secretary.
When
Sri Lanka Navy and Police ventured into deep seas and returned with more than 1,400 kilograms of seized drugs and handed it over to the authorities, one portion of the stock goes to court and the other returns to the drug trade. That was how things took place. We have identified the enemy and brought them before the law. These things happen when large stocks are kept in stores. Therefore, we, together with the Ministry of Law, have decided to immediately forward these stocks to a judge as soon as they are seized and destroy them after keeping a small sample for legal procedures.
Renzo Montanari, an Italian vineyard owner, donated a ventilator machine to the surgical intensive care unit of the National Hospital today.
The event saw the participation of several dignitaries, including the Deputy Italian Ambassador to Sri Lanka, Her Excellency Allegra Baistrocchi. The donated ventilator cost 1.2 million rupees.
The donor is actually Mr. Renzo Montanari. I have known him for the last 25 years. He calls Sri Lanka his second residence. He is passionate about Sri Lanka and he likes Sri Lanka. Actually, the machine that he is donating is here. It's a high-flow nasal oxygen machine. During the height of the pandemic last year in April, he was stuck in Italy, but he was feeling so sorry for the people here who were suffering, and I got a call from him that he wants to donate or to do something for the Sri Lankan people. So Mr. Montanari called me last week and said not to wait for him anymore, but to hand over this machine as donation by him.
I'm very humbled and I'm very honored to be able to represent Mr. Montanari here today, who is one of the significant members of our small Italian community in Sri Lanka. And he was one of the first promoters of Sri Lanka to me. I chose to come to Sri Lanka, and I was fortunate that my ministry sent me here. And the reason why I chose Sri Lanka is because I feel that because I hadn't come here before, I felt that there is a lot of similarities between Sri Lankans and Italians, especially in what is our value system. So I was able to come to Sri Lanka and feel immediately at home because of the generosity of its people, and it's a generosity also of the Italian, Mr. Montanari, that we're here a bit to celebrate today, because he is one of the biggest supporters of Sri Lanka. Unfortunately, this year, the situation is such that he couldn't come. But he wanted to do something to give back to the Sri Lankans, because he said this population gave so much to him from the heart, from the soul, from the interactions.
For about a national hospital, as you know, it's the biggest hospital in the country. And we have more than 3,000 beds here. To be exact, 3,231 as of yesterday. We have a lot of patients, and even we screen all the patients for the COVID at the moment. And when they are becoming positive, when they have any urgent treatments, it's also attended, and then only they are sending away for the treatment centers. Let me thank Deputy Ambassador for gracing the occasion, and also the Mr. Montanari for arranging this thing, and also I think Dr. Anthony Mendes for the coordination.
And with that, we wrap up tonight's edition of Primetime News. Thank you very much for joining us. Good night.